Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Energy Revolution Hub. We have now a session on electric vehicles and renewable energy, powering the transport sector transformation. First, a few housekeeping remarks. So we have a session that will last till about 17:30. We have first 6 speakers. We have in the program also a panel session listed, but let's see at the end whether we need that, because we'll also have questions now after the individual presentations. There is a coffee break planned at 15:25. So about 1.5 hours from now, and then we'll resume at 4 o'clock. For the speakers, we have about 20-25 minutes planned for the presentation plus the Q&A session. So a few words to introduce the topic. So there is a very important new development in the transport sector with electromobility. Today, the share of electricity in transport is low. At a global scale, it's about 1% of final energy demand in transport, but that will change rapidly in the coming years. In our projection, we have about 1/3 of all transport energy being electricity by 2050, and about half of all cars, light-duty vehicles, being electric by 2050. And some other projections are out there that are even more optimistic. So the impact of these cars on the electricity system are twofold. First of all, they of course generate additional electricity demand. But a perhaps more important question is, what does it mean for peak demand? And what does it mean for flexibility in the power system? So, and that's where the topic of smart charging comes into play. So, on one hand, the question is, can we charge these cars at moments of ample supply of renewable energy? That would be beneficial to facilitate the integration of renewables. And as these cars have batteries, in a sense they are batteries on wheels, can we perhaps use part of that battery capacity also to provide services to the grid? So that is a second aspect. The smart charging is something that is a lot talked about, but it's still at early days, and there are a number of aspects that are not entirely clear yet, and that will determine how important this strategy is. One of the questions is how long will these vehicles be connected to the grid? So if we are all going for fast charging along the highways, then it will not be very smart charging. So the smart charging will only work if these cars are connected to the grid virtually every time they are parked. The immediate implication is you need to have a lot of charging points and a lot of smart charging points to make that happen. It means charging points at home. and charging points at the office, and perhaps also at other key locations. So, as I said, that there are two strategies of charging. There is, let's say, slow charging, or at an relatively low speed, and there is fast charging or ultra fast charging. And the third development or third concept is vehicle to grid, V2X type of use of the technology. A final aspect is consumer acceptance. So, will the consumer accept that a battery is used for grid services? What are the consumer wishes in regard to the state of charge at any moment in time? So, smart charging it can take place in a number of ways. So, the most simple one is just a time of use tariff. You can have a very basic type of control on the charging. You can have a more sophisticated one. So for example, basic control would be you only charge during the day. Control charging means that there is a signal of there is sufficient availability of clean energy and low prices, and then the charging starts. Much more sophisticated is this concept of vehicle to grid. Where you also have the flows in the opposite direction. And there are a large number of pilot projects in all these different concepts. So today there are about 4 million electric light-duty vehicles. That's battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids. And that share of the market continues to grow rapidly. So today about 2% of car sales, but it's rapidly growing. And there are very ambitious targets in a number of countries to phase out ICEs, internal combustion engine cars. There's also other technology trends regarding the size of the battery. As batteries get cheaper, we go to larger batteries with longer drive range. New types of charging technologies being introduced. And also a trend towards more fast charging stations. So some of these trends are positive for integration of more renewables through smart charging. Some of the trends are perhaps not that positive. So we can have a discussion on where the net what the net effect will be of these different trends. To give one example of a trend that may reduce the potential somewhat is so we're going to have electric vehicles. Which is positive, but there's also talk about autonomous cars. And autonomous cars, especially in a city environment, where the use of these cars, so the kilometers driven would go up significantly. Well, if we have a trend like that, then it would reduce the potential to use these car batteries for smart charging. So seems very far-fetched right now, but it's an example of a trend that could limit the potential somewhat. There are different types of electric vehicles. So the cars, the trucks, and the electric buses. All of them have a somewhat specific charging characteristics, and that may also impact their potential and strategy how to integrate them with smart charging. This is a topic where IRENA is currently also looking at. We are looking at it especially from the viewpoint of what can smart charging mean for integrating higher shares of renewables into the power system. And early next year we'll launch a report on a smart charging innovation outlook, electric vehicles and renewable energy source integration, both about the technology development and what that now means at the systems level. So these are a few introductory remarks. I would now like to move to our first presenter. It's Alberto Piglia, who is the head of e-mobility at Enel X. Title of his presentation, Charging Infrastructure for EV and Interactions with the Grid. And I'll try to... Okay.
Thanks. Thank you, Dolph, and thanks everybody. Good morning, my name is Alberto Piglia. I lead e-mobility within Enel X. I've got 15 minutes, just a few words. I mean, first of all, who is Enel? I mean, big utility, you know, 65 plus million customers, which actually are point of distribution, present in many countries, 35, and number one renewable operator with 40 giga capacity. In the world of change of the utility, which I mean we are all facing, we decided to form a business line which was completely separate to the traditional produce, distribute, sell paradigm of utilities. So build Enel X. So that's the difference. The X stands for, actually, somebody asked, what does the X stands for? It stands for 4 business lines that we have. So we focus on e-mobility, so that's what I work on cities, so smart cities, on intelligent solutions for industries, and on intelligent solutions at home. I guide, as I was saying, the e-mobility world, and in the e-mobility space, first of all, I mean, Enel has been working in this since 2008. Today we have a team of more than 150 people working already on e-mobility, based in Rome and San Francisco, where we acquired a company called eMotorworks, which is integrated into our operations now, and that gives us the opportunity to work both in Europe, but also get, I mean, the most high-tech new trends coming from the Silicon Valley. Trends, innovation, we also capture from what are our 2 famous sponsorships, so Formula E and Moto E, where we are the charging solution providers of this world, and we do this like any, I mean, technology solution provider usually does with these extreme sports. We study those solutions and we try then to bring them into the world of e-mobility. Now, world of e-mobility. How do we see it, and where do we see it? First of all, I mean, there are estimations of things that are going to happen. Like all estimations, they're slightly different, but I think there's a clear trend. Electric mobility is going to happen. I mean, we know it, we all know it, and I think also everybody is now conscious of this. Even OPEC has given forecasts of growing e-mobility vehicles. Reason for this are, I mean, there's a cost battery reduction. Batteries cost a lot for cars. They represent 40% of more or less of what cost of a car is. So they're gradually, quite strongly going down, like it happened in the solar world, which will bring to cost parity at investment level soon. Already today, in certain circumstances, and I'm talking about cities with certain rules, it's already convenient to buy electric vehicles. There's another thing which people don't consider, which is not only the convenience of electric vehicles, but it's also the pleasure of driving an electric vehicle. Who has driven electric vehicles knows how nice it is to drive it. And it doesn't need to be a top end. You also can drive as not a top end. Growth, 2040, probably 50%, probably 40%, probably 60%. It's going to happen. What is going to happen in immobility in general is a great revolution driven by certain markets. For sure, there will be different ways, completely different ways of using vehicles for us. There will be more sharing, there will be more electrified vehicles, some targeted for certain needs. Today, for example, I mean, again, city is the place where electric vehicles are convenient. The world of truck will come later on. How are they linked to renewables? I mean, we see a strong link driven by the fact that, I mean, we all know that world is going more and more towards renewables. And actually, from that point of view, electric vehicles, we see them as an opportunity because, like Rolf was saying, they are batteries with wheels. They can help flexibility. However, and before moving into the fantastic world of flexibility of vehicle grid integration, I think, I mean, as utility, you need to do a number of things which are relevant for the end users. Because for us to have 50% of electric vehicle cars in 2040, you need to make a customer experience easy today for a customer, which means giving them the opportunity to charge in public space and in private space, which is a completely different way of charging than what happens today for people who still drive cars with fuels. They don't charge at home. We have the opportunity to give this to customers. And this is, I mean, what we are doing as NLX. We are charging point operator in public space, and we provide also a charging solution in the private space. Public points of charge are relevant. If you want to have an electric vehicle today, you need to be certain that you can drive from Rome to Florence with an electric vehicle, not only in Rome. Or you need to be certain that you want to come from, if you want to go to from Rotterdam, you want to go to the South France for a holiday, you need to be able to do it. In order to do this, you need public infrastructure, which is a thing that as NLX we have taken a very strong stance point in doing it. We have a plan of installing public charging infrastructure in Italy. We will present next week the plan for Romania and for Spain. We're going to install around 14,000 electric public charging stations by 2022. I don't like to talk only of announcements. Just give you some figures. We've launched this plan last year, where we're saying that we will be installing 2,500 charging stations. We have already installed more than 1,000. We're installing in Italy. 2 weeks ago, we installed 100 charging stations in a week. Last week, it was a bit more difficult because of heavy rains we had. We arrived at 50. This is something that you need to do because people need to realize in the cities everywhere that you have charging stations. It's relevant for utilities that these networks are open networks and they're interoperable, because we need to give the opportunity for a customer from Oslo to arrive to Palermo with an interoperable experience and an easy experience. In order to do this, I think what we are working on is a number of intelligent charging solutions which cover the different charging needs of a customer. These are very, I hope you can get, yes? customer-centric. I mean, Dolph was raising a point. How will charging go? It's not going to go in one direction or another. You need to have a mix of directions. You will continue to have AC charging in the cities for small vehicles which will be used in the cities, and we will continue to use in the cities, either as individual or as sharing or as taxis, for example. For these, you don't need fast charging. You can charge overnight. It's the best thing for those. I mean, the lucky guys who can charge overnight at home know that they get their battery charged, they got 200 kilometers of autonomy, which represents more or less 95% of the needs of today's customer. This will continue to happen. So you will charge at home, you will charge in public spaces, car parks, supermarkets, chains. These are the guys where we're installing. Obviously, there will be a world of travel. For this world of travel, you need to have higher batteries, powered batteries. You need to have fast charging solutions. So you need to balance the charging at home with the charging in the cities with the high power charging. And this is why we are installing fast charging stations in the markets where we are present. Just to give you a number, a year ago, summer last year, there were no Enel fast public stations in the country, thanks to the EVA Plus project. So nobody could actually go down from north to south with an electric vehicle, unless you had a Tesla, but you need to do or only some stops. In a year, we installed 113 of them, and we're installing them nearly every day. So this is something possible. This is in the fast charging, where you will charge today in 20 minutes, tomorrow in 80 minutes. I think this is the relevant point, because as a utility, we need to focus in the next 2 or 3 years on opening up the market on this aspect. Having in mind, the world of flexibility. We believe that cars are batteries with wheels. We have already done pilots, some were mentioned, on vehicle to grid, and also on demand response services offered by cars. We have aggregated our fleet of cars together with other batteries and have participated to demand response program. This is something which is absolutely needed and relevant, because in 2030, when there will be a lot of vehicles around, and I'm just saying a date just to give an example, the problem, I don't think it's going to be around the fact that there is many vehicles, so there's not enough power. That's not the problem. The real problem can be the fact that if we all arrive at home at 7 o'clock and stick in and charge, if we don't have smart charging solutions, there needs to be big investments in the network. With intelligent charging solutions, this is not going to happen. This is not needed. Already today in California, our customers can plan on their app when they want to charge. They leave the car connected at 7 o'clock. They want it charged back at 6:30 a.m. They start working early in the US, and give us the opportunity to charge when needed, or actually choose options. In that market, it's a market where you can actually choose if you want to charge with when there is more renewable energy available. This is the world. We foresee. This is the world. It's a world that is going to happen, where we need to work on, which is a world of vehicle grid integration, as I was saying. I think it's going to be even this one. As at individual point of view, it's good. It's fantastic. It's very forward-looking. I think at B2B point of view, it's much closer. And going back to one of the points that was introduced before, is a customer going to let you use their battery? In California, it's happening. They are doing it because they have an economic benefit. They save money. When you talk about B2B customers, it's even easier. Because they actually, if you give them the opportunity to participate to demand response market, which is the easiest thing, or vehicle to grid, where it is possible, they can have save money whilst they have their car parks. This will happen for the cars that are a lot parked. There will be cars that are not going to be parked a lot because they are the cars that are going to be in car sharing, driving a lot around, which will be used a lot. So I try to stick to the time that I was given. Closing my sort of short speech, yes, e-mobility is going to happen. As utility, I think the first role that we need to do is open up the market, working in public infrastructure and private infrastructure, giving an easy end-user experience, having interoperability and interoperable networks, which is fundamental for customers to move from one country to another, having in mind today that there will be, or there potentially are, challenges in the future if you don't have smart charging solutions that will enable them to use electric vehicle and to talk with the grid. That's my speech.
Thank you very much, Alberto, for that fascinating presentation. So you come with a positive message. The consumer is interested to engage in this. Maybe one question from my side. What is in it for NL?
Well, it's the more electric vehicles go around, the better it is for any utility. That's the first. That's, I think, the first thing. I think it's very linked to our decarbonization strategy. We've pushed a lot towards renewables, as you all know, as I think the figures were showed. Nearly 50% of our production, more or less, come from renewable already today. There's a clear decarbonization going on. We know if this is going to happen, you need to have flexibility. And cars are a very good way to provide flexibility. They are not capex intensive. They are available from the customer. In order for this world to happen, I think it's important you need to give a customer an easy user experience. So for us, we are fully integrated in this world. We see benefit in opening up this market, and we obviously see that there is a need to address the flexibility needs that are there because of renewables, and cars are a good answer to that.
Great, very good. Any questions from the audience? I see one there in the back. We have a special microphone for you. I'm not going to throw it, I'm going to bring it. You have to keep it close to you.
Yes. So one question which is very basic. How are you sure that the battery-driven electrical car will really be the future and not maybe hydrogen? They were just reported that there is a breakthrough in hydrogen in the catalytic converters right now, and then of course you could also transfer the energy, the solar power energy for instance, or wind energy into hydrogen. So how are you so sure that you build up a network, and probably the future is not sure about what will happen on the technology side?
When you work in new businesses and which look at the future, you're never sure of things, obviously. There are some strong signals of what is going on. Strong signals that, happen every day. First of all, data. If you look at data sales, 1 million 2016, 2 million 2017, 4 million 2018, not year completed. That's, the Singularity University calls it exponential growth. There's customer benefits to it. Again, I don't know who drives electric vehicles. Driving an electric vehicle, and it doesn't need to be a top end, is a very nice experience. There's needs from the municipalities. They are driving more and more towards this. There's needs for European Union. CO2 emission rules are happening. All this, and then there is a player which is not very present today, but is a player with which, we talk daily today, which 2 years ago sounded strange, which is car manufacturers, which are definitely going in that direction. If you see, I mean, the car manufacturers, what is going to come out in the next 2 or 3 years, you see that the offer is very strong. Other technologies will happen. I mean, nobody has the crystal ball, but it's clear. I mean, this is a clear direction. I foresee a world where you will have different technologies happening. As Enel, we've taken a very strong position on this. And actually, I think if something we have done is we have opened up the market in Italy, which is the smallest market, a very small market for EVs. I mean, thanks also to our push, also there, cars, I mean, electric vehicles sales have more than doubled. We decided not to wait. There was a chicken and egg thing. Do you need the infrastructure or the car? We decided to go for the infrastructure and to go for it because we think it's something that is going to happen. Nothing is sure, but there are clear trends that tell you that this is going to happen. Then, in 2 years' time, if we're already here, some of the things that we will be seeing today will be slightly different. We know it. That's why we need our plan is a flexible plan. I mean, also from power point of view, we talk every day with the car manufacturers to understand how much I need to push for high power charging, how much I need to push for AC, and having these discussions, it's fantastic because you never have the single answer, and that's why you need to have a balance of the two. There was a question there.
One more question there. And I'm going to take the question in the back and then we'll stop.
Thank you. Luís Ferreira from EDP Distribution in Portugal. One of the questions I had for you was if your investment is paid by regulation, by tariffs, or is it private and then paid by the users who use and pay for the usage of the chargers. And the second question I would like to ask you is from the grid point of view. I'm working now at a distribution company. Most of the investment that can be avoided through smart charging is at the connection level, because usually a grid, and I see your photograph, will have to have an infrastructure at the secondary substation transformer that is able to cope with the whole capacity of those chargers if they decide to connect at the same time. So how do you see that the connection to the DSO in a way that smart charging could avoid this investment into a more smart investment?
So I'll try to be quicker on this answer than the first one because we got other speakers. First one, it's full capital risk of Enel. So we invest. It's not a distribution deal. It's not regulated. It's our money. When there is public funding coming from the European Union or bids, we compete for them, obviously, but it's our money. And I think it's going to be repaid by the users, much of which depend how many cars there will be available. I mean, on the second one, I think it's relevant. I mean, the evolution will be quite dramatic. So, I mean, we are a distributor. Not we, but we talk with our distributor, and actually these charging solutions were born with in the world of distributors. So that's why smart charging is particularly relevant. I think not everything will be grid-based like it is today. When you talk about, I mean, the high power charging solutions, they're going to be battery stacked. Not necessarily everything is going to be taken out of the power today. And this is something that is gradually going to happen as the world evolves. I mean, today I don't see this as a big opportunity. Actually, it's a big business for the distributors. The plan that we're doing in Italy, all the distributors are happy because we're putting money into this. While we dialogue, we learn it's going to change. I don't think I mean, the world of tomorrow is not, high power charges of 1 megawatt placed in every place. There will be, there are studies already of solutions which are battery stacked that have different approaches.
Hi there, Elchin Mamadov from Bloomberg Intelligence. I have two questions. The first one is similar to what the colleague from EDP mentioned. It's an unregulated business. Utilities already once bet on gas-fired power plants and had to write the assets in terms of impairments. Why do you think this won't be the case with EV charging, given that it's unregulated asset? This, because I still don't see the case how you monetize that. Flexibility is great, but it's not a wrap. It's not in your regulated asset base. So how do you monetize that? And the second question is, you are competing against oil and gas companies and some car manufacturers as well. How do you differentiate against them, and why do you think you have a competitive advantage? Thank you.
You're welcome. Again, it goes back to very similar to question number one. NLX was born just because of these questions. Taking it out of the world of the traditional utilities puts you in the condition that you have to face the market, which is a completely different approach to a traditional approach. We believe that giving end user a good customer experience in the world of private charging, in the world of public charging, or in the B2B world, in a world that is growing, because as I said, there are trends that show that the growth is a way to make a return on investment out of it. There's a variable which is very much dependent on how many cars are available. I mean, we've done our calculations, and I can tell you that it depends on how many cars and how much the people will use these cars. But that's obviously a variable. It's an unregulated business. I mean, we are very active in this because we believe it is the right thing to do, and also with a first mover advantage, we're taking a bit of advantage into that. In this world, I mean, there's things called like co-opetition, which I think are relevant. We want to sign interoperability agreements with all operators in Italy and all over the world, Europe, of course. Or in Latin America, because you need them. You don't need them in US, given that it's a different world. Why? Because we want end user, as I was saying, to have a seamless experience from Norway to Sicily. Then we compete on service. That's another world. Car manufacturers need utilities. I mean, it's not that they don't know how to. I don't come from a utility world. It's very difficult. I mean, installing a wall box in a company or in public space is very difficult. It's not their business. So they need to partner with you. And when you partner, I mean, you have areas of potential gain for everybody. I don't think it's not going to happen that somebody will take it all. You need to be part of a stakeholder world, and this is exactly, I mean, what we have taken the role we're having. Before NLX, in NL, we tried many things in electric mobility, including selling electric bikes, which is, it's a fantastic business. It grows. I mean, there's tons of electric bikes sold, but it's not in our business. I mean, others can do it. We even try to do car sharing. We're not good at that. I mean, there's very good companies doing that. Where are we good at? I think giving intelligent charging solutions. So we concentrate on that. And, I mean, I can tell you that car sharing companies are coming to us saying, can you help us on this? And same car manufacturers. I think that's how I see it.
Okay, we've run out of time. Thank you very much, Alberto.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'd like to move to our second speaker. We'll hear from Dominique Lagarde, who is the Senior Executive Vice President, Electric Mobility Enedis, French major distribution company, and he'll talk about the Enedis involvement in e-mobility in France. Dominique.
Thank you very much, and I will try to share with you what can be done by a regulated company in electric mobility, which you just understood is clearly an unregulated activity, a competitive business, a sort of big business cake of, everyone would like to take a part of the cake, but we are a regulated company, and maybe I can try to recall you. Alors, can you help me about my presentation? I cannot find it. So Enedis is a regulated company, the DSO of France. We cover 95% of the French territory, and we are operating the low voltage and high voltage and medium voltage lines. Thank you very much. The first message, and this is the first part of my of the answer of the question, is that we are already an active player in terms of in the domain of electric mobility. Maybe for three reasons. The first one is that we are already connecting every charging points to the grid. You are aware that the charging points could be of a different level of power, 7 kilowatt, 22 kilowatt, 50 kilowatt, 150 kilowatt, 350 kilowatt, and so on. All these charging points are connected to the grid. Today we have 22,000 of charging points, public one, in France, and it will grow, of course, rapidly in the next years. Second point is that we are already running some electric cars. Our fleet is composed of more than 1,700 of cars. No, yes, 1,700. Yes, and we have 1,000 of 10% of our fleet is electric. You can see one of these just behind you, and this car came from Munich to Vienna on Monday. And so we are also learning what does mean today roaming or interoperability. You can probably follow up my presentation with Didier here and Mathieu is somewhere here. They drove the car on Monday, so they can explain to you how they pay for charging every 200 kilometers. It's not so easy these days in Europe. The third point is that we have also participated in a lot of projects in France and also in Europe in order to experience certain, I would say, use cases which will be developed in the large scale in the following years. I have in mind, the private charging points in collective housings, or also charging points on the public lighting grids, just to give you two examples, but we have also participated in many other experiences. So the first message is that we have already an experience on that. Maybe I can also recall that during the last 5 years or 10 years from now, we connected also more than 30,000 of solar power generation installations, so that when it will come to when the need will come to optimize and to smart charge or to smart operate the grid using the connection between solar generation installation and electric vehicle, in fact we will be a part of the game again, because the grid is clearly a central actor of this. Now, we have launched a strategy within Enedis in order to go further into this electric mobility challenge. Of course, we share with you and with everyone on the planet that electric mobility is a part of the solution towards a reduction of pollution and also a reduction of CO2 emission as soon as the electricity is produced without generating CO2 emission. And we share internally, and I give that to your thinking also, some convictions. The first one is that the electric vehicle fleet will grow dramatically. The French government share a common view with the automakers, which is to reach 1 million of electric vehicles in France by 2022. Donc this means that we will multiply by 5 the existing number of public charging points in France. So in the next 4 years, the growth will be so multiplied by 8 in terms of electric vehicle. So it's a real huge growth, and also multiplied by 5 or more the charging points. The second point is that e-mobility is a collective challenge. It is really interesting to look after every speeches about that. You can hear and listen to this idea coming from automakers, coming from data industry, coming from grid operators, coming also from electricity suppliers. All these worlds should work together in order to develop electric mobility. So it's very stimulating, I would say, but it is not so often that the success is linked to the quality of a partnership and not the quality of fighting against each other. So it's a pleasure to work in such a challenge. The last point is, of course, that Enedis also should learn electric mobility, and so there is some internal challenges, some change management to operate in order to facilitate our activity in terms of electric mobility. To take only one example, as you understood, we have already more than 1,500 electric vehicles, and so we have human experience of driving vehicles. So some of us say, I don't want no more go back to thermal vehicles, and some others say, wow, this electric vehicle, I'm not sure I can use it because I have my use case is not adapted to this electric vehicle. So we know that also, and we can work with many people to listen to that and to know how to beat these challenges. So what does it mean for us to be, as it is written here on this slide, we would like to be a tier 1 partner for every actors in electric mobility in order to create solutions, and we put on the slide to co-create solutions, as I mentioned before, in order to make the widespread EV development possible. It is not only we think that the EV vehicle will develop, but we have to create the conditions to do that. It is not so obvious if you think about roaming or things like that. I think we still have to simplify a lot the use of electric vehicles. So concretely, what does it mean for Enedis? It means that we have to deliver, we have to learn, and especially learn by doing, and we have also to cooperate. And if I give some examples, like it is on this slide, you can see that delivering for us is clearly to connect more and more charging points and to adapt the different solutions to the different use cases. And also to provide support to local authorities. You can imagine that we are questioned every day to how to develop electric mobility locally, and also nationally or at the European level, and we have to be able to give some answer. We are not commercial people, but we have to give some advice and to describe how the market will evolve. So we are not the only guys, of course, to do that, but we have to learn that and to deliver on this side also. In the middle of the slide, we have to learn by doing. Why I say that? Because, of course, we know a lot about grid operations, but electric mobility is a bit different. If you want to discuss and to partner in a good quality relationship with automakers, you have to understand the auto industry. If you want to put some charging points in private parkings under collective housings, then you have to deal with different owners of the apartments and with real estate actors in order to develop with them right solutions, correct solutions for charging points, etc., etc. So we have to learn even on I would say normal activities for us, but it is not normal when you adapt yourself to each use cases. And also we have to prepare the future. Of course, the future in terms of data, a lot of worlds of data will be in connection. The data world coming from the vehicle, the data world coming from the charging points and also the data world coming from the grid. So we have to be successful in connecting these worlds and also protect the connection of these different worlds. And of course, I have in mind the cyber security challenge. It has to be tackled at international level in order to protect this new era of connected grids altogether. And the last point is clearly to cooperate, as I mentioned before. It is true not only, of course, at a national level, it is true at a local level, but also at a European level. We have under development some projects helped by the European Commission, which deals with being able to propose charging points all along the different routes, European routes, across the border. So it is important to develop that. We are also a part of this game. And also, as you know, the European level is very important in terms of also of regulation. And I have to say that in this case of electric mobility, the regulation is probably the main push to the industry, to the development of electric mobility. Sometimes the regulation come after. In this case, they come before, and everyone try to fit with the regulations. So this is interesting to notice altogether. Thank you for that, and I'm open to some questions if I was not too long.
Thank you very much, Dominique. Maybe a first question from me before I open it up. You quickly addressed the point of smart charging, but you haven't really addressed the point of what does this now mean for renewables? Is that something you are also looking at, or in a French context, it's not that important?
As every country, we will deal with smart charging. The first step is clearly to be successful collectively in the short-term development of electric vehicle. By short-term, I mean the next 4 years. As I said, it represents for France something like multiplied by 8 the number of electric vehicles running. So this is a challenge. And I think this is a priority, delivering that. And of course, we have to prepare the future. Donc, under that chapter, I put the smart charging. So that means for us launching some demonstrations with partners, dealing with, of course, the solar systems, the smart charging points, and of course the batteries. And as it was said just before, you need to find the vehicles. Be sure that you said that. Be sure that the vehicles are parked, linked to the grid, and ready to give their energy located in the battery to the grid and back and worse. So we will prepare that. We have some sites identified already, and we will put a demonstration. Real demonstration in the next year or the year after. But I think it will develop a lot. But these days, it is not the main priority. Very
good. Any questions from the audience? Well, I don't see any. You were very clear.
Thank you very much. All right.
Okay, I would like to move to our next speaker. We'll hear from Bastian Pfarrherr, who is the Head of Innovation Management at Stromnetz Hamburg, the Hamburg DSO, right?
Yes, correct.
And title of his presentation is Controlling Private E-Mobility Charging Points in Public Low Voltage Grids. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much. Welcome from my side. I will tell you something about our idea of controlling private e-mobility charging points in our public 0.4 kV grid as our role as a distribution system operator in Hamburg. First of all, I will give you a short introduction of Stromnetz Hamburg. And then I will give you an overview about the public charging infrastructure in Hamburg. Actually, we have the highest number of public charging points in the German city. So this is the way we came from. And now we will see the rising number of loading points in the private sector. A load development because of EVs in Hamburg. It's very interesting for the general load that we see in the next years. And of course, our smart treatment options and foresight planning for this theme of this presentation, controlling the public infrastructure in the future and the private infrastructure, of course. And at the end of this presentation, I will give you a short overview of our current fields of activity. We will see if the time is enough for this. So, company introduction. You will see the city of Hamburg at the left side with our 110 kV grid. And our role in this is the distribution system operation of the 110 kV down to the 0.4 kV. It's the public electric grid in Hamburg. And we have a second role. You will see here at the right side. Okay, the pointer does not work. It's no problem. We are the CPO for the complete public infrastructure for load of electric vehicles in Hamburg. At the end of this year, we have a number of 1,000 public charging points in the city. And it's a development we started several years ago. I will come to this in the next slides. One more sentence about the company Stromnetz Hamburg. We are a 100% daughter of the free and Hanseatic city of Hamburg. So it's not longer part of the Vattenfall company. Perhaps you know that the city of Hamburg bought the complete grid back from Vattenfall. So now it's a public company. And I think it's very interesting, especially in this role of being the CPO for this public charging infrastructure. We do this also for several other cities, especially Dresden, Paderborn, large cities in Germany, where we have the CPO role and bring them our IT services for controlling and managing the infrastructure for EVs in the public areas. Some examples, what we do. I said something about the public infrastructure in Hamburg. You see it here on the left side. In the middle, we talk about hub concepts. We are also managing for the city of Hamburg. It's an additional way of the public transport system in Hamburg. You have these hubs at the end of big U-tubes or S-Bahn train stations in Hamburg where you finish your journey and you can switch to an e-car. And at the right side, we have a concept of load management for a bus fleet. We have a large area where we have more than 200 buses, and these buses will be complete electric in the next years. And so you have to make a managing for these buses, because the number of load is very high when you don't managing it. And this is also one of the examples of our activities in the public infrastructure for the electric, for the e-mobility. So the public charging infrastructure, I said we started several years ago in 2009. And now we are at the moment at 771 charging points in Hamburg. I said at the end of the year we are planning with 1,000. Perhaps we will make it. We are on a good way. And you see, we started 10 years ago with this public charging infrastructure. So the experience in Stromnetz Hamburg is nearly 10 years with this theme. And at the moment we build 5 stations a week, perhaps 10 stations a week. It's a bit depending on the weather and on several other things. Here you see an overview of the numbers of charging points at the left side. And the interesting thing, I think, at the right side, you see the energy, the number of energy load in the public infrastructure. And you see it's very high. We have nearly 140,000 kilowatt hours in September this year. And you see also the number of loading processes. It's 11,500 at the moment. And it's only in the public infrastructure. It's very important. And from our opinion, the number of private infrastructure will be increasing because the public infrastructure is very high in use. So the need of private infrastructure is there. This is a graphic I will skip because it's very regional, and here we have a little bit. I will skip it. It's hard to explain when you don't know the streets in Hamburg and the areas in Hamburg. So let me skip this one. What do we see in load development because of EVs in Hamburg? I said the buses for public transport will be complete electrified in the next years. This is a driver for more load in the grid, a very big driver for more load in the grid. And we will see nearly 100,000 EVs in the city of Hamburg in the next 10 years. So these both are the most critical drivers for us for the load in the next years. And we see we have to do something because the low voltage grid does not fit with this increasing. This is the city of Hamburg with its suburban parts. And we try to make an evaluation where we will find these electric cars in the private sector in the future. And you see very high, it's a dark color. These are the typical suburbs where the grid is not so strong like in the central city. So you have a double problem. You have more EVs in the private sector and you have a weak grid. But you have a chance, I will say you have a chance, because the loading time in the private sector is normally very long. The cars are standing there overnight, so the loading time is overnight. And when you are in the public areas, you will have a short loading time. So this is a point where we will be active. This is a slide where we try to evaluate the number of bottlenecks in our 0.4 kV grid, and it's there are several scenarios. First of all, we started with private infrastructure with 11 kV load. And we had a number of 3% of all the cars in Hamburg that are private EVs loading in private infrastructure. So we came to 20,000 EVs loading at the private infrastructure. And the second scenario is 9% of all cars in Hamburg are private EVs or loading at private infrastructure. And you see these numbers. The interesting number are these, 200 and 800. It's the first scenario, 20,000 private EVs loading at private infrastructure. Now, at the moment, will cause 200 bottlenecks in our grid. We have the number of 6,000 transformer stations in Hamburg. So 200 of these transformer stations will have a bottleneck in the 0.4 kV grid. In the second scenario, 60,000 EVs, private EVs loading at private infrastructure. You have the number of 800 bottlenecks. Remember, 6,000 transformer stations, 800 bottlenecks. You have a problem as a distribution system operator. So what will we do? This is, at the left side, a typical situation we will see in the future. You have a transformer station here, and you have one of the 0.4 cables from this transformer station going to a typical street here. And we counted the number of parking places. And then we calculate the number of EVs that will park in this area and load in this public area at their public infrastructure. And you see here in green the typical load in the grid, cost of all the households at this cable. And in red, we added the number of loads from the EVs. And the situation is, we are at 16 o'clock, everybody's coming home, and everybody starts to loading his car simultaneously. It is a possible situation. What will you do? You can't control it. You have no possibility as a distribution operator to control this. But now you have the chance to control the loading process. When the car is connected to the infrastructure and you know this, then you can control the loading process, because most of these cars will be there till 6 o'clock in the next morning. And this is the chance for us not to rebuild our complete grid, because this is the alternative. What to do when you have an increasing load in your net, in your grid? You have to rebuild it. And it's in the city of Hamburg, it took a long time, it is very expensive, and so on and so on. I don't have to explain, everybody knows, nobody wants to have holes in the street. So our idea is to solve this problem with intelligence. You see here, this P-max. We will measure the load in our transformer stations for each of these 0.4 cables to know if you come into a critical situation like this. We will know it in the future because we measure it. At the moment, there is no measurement. You don't know it. There are only a few instruments up to 10 kV and 110 kV, but in the 0.4 grid, there is no measurement. So the first step is to know if we have a problem. The second step is, perhaps it's the first step, but I say it no. The other step is every of these private infrastructure must register in our system. When you build a private infrastructure for an EV, you have to register it, so that we know in this street, at this number, in this house, there is a private infrastructure. So then we came to the description, what will we do? Will we do it with a central system, or will we do it with a decentral system. Because how we can, I skip back, how we can do it, how can we control these points, this private infrastructure? We have the measurement now, but we don't have the ability to control. So will we do it in a central way or will we do it in a decentral way? There are advantages and disadvantages. In this project, I will present you in a few minutes. We will do it in a decentral way. The intelligence of the system is in the transformer station. You remember the picture before. And the intelligence control every loading infrastructure after its 0.4 cables. Perhaps at this slide it will be a little bit clearer what I mean. You find the transformer station here again, and you find the monitor and control unit in this transformer station. So we will do the measurement in the station, and we have the intelligence to decide what is to do with these measurements. We have an uplink to our central IT system. It's for updates and to control if this central unit is still working. But of course, the main intelligence and the decisions will be made here. And then you have the customer installation. You have this private loading infrastructure. It is connected with several CPOs. You can have CPO 1, for example, and CPO 2. And these CPOs normally talk to the infrastructure via the OCPP protocol. And you see, we don't have anything to do with it. We have the private infrastructure, they have the communication to the CPO, everything is okay. But then we have a local control unit and a connection unit via PLC, it's power line communication, to the central intelligence in the transformer station. And then you have the ability to control these private infrastructures. You have the information if you have a critical situation in your grid, and you have the ability to give these control units via the connection units an information to decrease the load of the private loading infrastructure, perhaps from 100% to 80% or to 70%. The loading time is a little bit longer, of course. When you don't have the full load, the loading time is a little bit longer. But with this idea that the cars are standing there normally the complete night, we think it is not such a big problem. The new idea of this system is the decentral way with this control unit in the transformer station, and this power line communication it is only a few meters from the transformer station to the next household. We are in discussion to build this in the next months with Siemens in Hamburg. So this project is starting, I think, in 2 or 3 weeks. We start at our central at our area in Hamburg with phase 1, where we install this system for our EVs from Stromnetz Hamburg and in our own substations at our private grid in the next months. And in the middle of 2019, we will go in our grid with the system. So we install 30 of these central units together with firma Siemens, and we will control all the private infrastructure after these 30 transformer stations with the 30 central units in them. And we will get some experience how big the problem is, because actually we don't know it. We don't know how big will the problem be and how big is the problem. And it's a pilot project to get experience, more experience, what to do in the future. Is it a way, an alternative, not to rebuild your complete grid? This is our idea, and I think it's the idea of Siemens too, because we want to develop a product which will fit to every 0.4 kV grid and every transformer station. First in Hamburg, but perhaps a little bit bigger. The last slide, I will give you some fields of activity of Stromnetz Hamburg. I think, I don't know what the time is, but I think I can talk a little bit about, but I see you don't see it very good. I start at the left side with the public infrastructure of EVs. I told you a lot about that. And we will go to our founded projects. This project I talked about is not a founded project, but we have activities in lots of founded projects with several universities and so on, where we also try to get experience in this electric vehicle theme. Nobody knows exactly what will happen with the grid in the future because of EVs. We have lots of ideas, but nobody knows it. So we have lots of founded projects where we have activities. We have lots of participations in advisory boards to talk about rules for the future. And we have the requirements of the grid. It's here. Here we have the point EVs meets the grid. It's exactly that what I told you in the last minutes. So, I will come to the end. We have some external activities, but it's not so interested for this. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that interesting presentation. A first question that came up listening to you was, Germany is quite unique because it has nearly 1,000 DSOs.
Yes.
Is now every German DSO developing his own solution?
Not yet. We are the first. The question is good because it aims to who has the problem. We have nearly these 1,000 DSOs, and most of them don't have this problem now. Because of the number of EVs in Hamburg at the moment and the number of public infrastructure, we know this problem will come. And perhaps it comes a little bit earlier to Hamburg because of the number of EVs. This is our idea.
But is there an intent? I mean, is there kind of a working group at DSO level to find standardized solutions?
Yes. You have several of these groups. You have the FNN, VDE group. You have the BDEW groups. We try to bring us in those groups. Remember the last slide with our activities in the advisory boards to create a standard. It's very important to create a standard that is working in the complete country and not only in Hamburg.
And the second question is about what is the means for renewables. In the north of Germany, you have wind surpluses, don't know what to do with it. You're working on integrating some of that?
We have a critical role in this theme because we are only the distribution system operator. So we build or we have the infrastructure to transport the energy. But the infrastructure is a little bit limited. You can transport the complete renewable energy from northern Germany to Hamburg, You have bottlenecks in the grid, several of them. You know the discussion in the press and on TV. And we have this problem at the local side too. So at the moment, it's not possible to bring the complete renewable energy from the northern coast to Hamburg. But the idea is, of course, to use renewable energies for the load of electric cars. But we can only give the infrastructure. We cannot control who will make renewables in our grid or in other grids. We can't control it.
So I open it up for the public. Any questions or comments? This one.
Well, thank you. Luís Ferreira, again from EDP Distribution in Portugal. Very interesting your presentation. We were aiming to work on something very similar. I would like to ask you several questions.
Okay.
But I will keep to only a few. First question, what's in it for the consumer or the investor in the charging infrastructure? How do you give him value with this kind of solution? The second question, your control units, are they integrated into the charger or are they separate units, and will they speak with OCPP with the charger? How do they communicate if they are not integrated?
Okay. First question, we don't give any value to anybody. Sounds hard, but we do this in our role as grid distribution system operator and not in our role as electromobility provider or so on. So we don't have the ability to give some fees.
Because from our own reflections, we were aiming that one of the values you could give to the customer is the cost of the grid connection. But I don't know if in Hamburg you have shallow grid connection charges or hard connection charges.
Yes, of course you can do this, but only when you have a new installation. Normally the grid connection is there and it is paid years or 10, 20, 30 years ago, so you don't have this ability. But in new installations, it's an alternative, yes. And second question, can you repeat please? Sorry?
If your control module of the charger was a separate module or integrated into the charger?
It is a separate module because we won't make suggestions for the infrastructure. It must be free. You have to use every system. So it's a separate module and it's communicate with the infrastructure.
Any further questions? In the back.
Peter Gornier from DSO in Switzerland. We have a similar project. You were talking about the transformer station. What do you do if you have bottlenecks elsewhere in the grid?
At the moment, with these scenarios, 100,000 EVs in 2030, we have only 4 substation areas with bottlenecks. We have identified them and we will renew them up to 2030. So there is no bottleneck at the 10 kV or 110 kV level.
But what about the cables? Cables are fine?
We measure the current in the cable, so we can identify both bottlenecks, transformer and cable.
But you don't expect any problems in the cables?
In the 0.4 kV, of course, we will expect problems in the cables. We have normally, typical situation in Hamburg, you have 400 houses connected to one transformer station. And you have 8 cables from this transformer station to these households. So 400 divided by 8, we have 50 households at one cable. So it will come to problems in the cable too.
Any further questions? I see none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we will have a coffee break. We will reconvene at 4 o'clock.